Welcome to the Black Etc. podcast, a podcast about how ideas and culture spread among Black Americans, especially outside mass media. I'm your host, Ian Youssef. Today's guest is none other than Chef Rock Harper. He's a chef and business owner. He's a media personality. You may know him from winning Hell's Kitchen in one of the early seasons years ago. I know him as a DC fixture. His restaurant, Queen Mother's Kitchen in Crystal City, Virginia, serves amazing fried chicken sandwiches. He also has a cell phone-free lounge called Hush Harbor in Washington, D.C. I have had a chance to eat his food, and he is the real deal. That's not often the case when you deal with food folks who become famous from TV. In the introduction to last week's episode, when I was talking to Cherie Williams, I mentioned an event in 2016, a Cuisine Noire event celebrating the opening of the National Museum of African American History and Culture in D.C. Chef Harper was actually one of the chefs providing food at that event. So I've actually tasted food from his hand. His dish was a take on gumbo based on Leah Chase's recipe, Leah Chase of New Orleans Dookie Chase fame, and the dish was phenomenal. I still remember it all these years later. There are some other connections, too, that Chef Harper has to prior guests and to future guests. Chef Harper has a current podcast called The Rock Harper Show, but he had a previous podcast called The Chef Rock Experiment, and he interviewed a number of people who have been on the podcast. Cherie Williams, who I just mentioned, for one, Adrian Miller, who was episode 2, and others. And if you listen to the Dr. Psyche Williams-Forson episode 4, you'll remember that she mentioned Rock Harper by name as a chef that she had a special professional working relationship with. They've done events together. I learned a lot from Chef Harper. I had a good time with this one, and I hope you do too. Please enjoy. Today I'm joined by Chef Rock Harper. He is obviously a chef, restaurateur, entrepreneur, author, speaker, and philanthropist. I first heard of him when he won season 3 of the cooking competition show Hell's Kitchen, but he's done so much more. He's written a book, 44 Things Parents Should Know About Healthy Cooking for Kids. He's the owner of Queen Mother's restaurant in Arlington, Virginia, Hill Prince in DC, which is now Hush Harbor, I believe. Welcome, Chef Harper. Thank you for joining me.
No, thanks for having me. I'm good to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
There are many terms for the food of Black Americans: soul food, Black American food, Southern food. How do you distinguish between these terms, and what is your preferred term?
Wow. That's a big one out the gate. I think it's a very personal experience, or it's very subjective, if you will. I mean, soul food is commonly attributed to the food that came out of the soul movement in the 60s and 70s, right? That was, when you started to see that term. I forget the year, but no one would suggest that these dishes started in 1900s, right? So I think that, it's a common term. I use it as it relates to certain specific dishes or types of environments where we may consume this food, the carryouts or, the restaurants that are sort of fashioned around soul food, or, family reunions, repasts and things of that nature. But I think that, if we reach back, soul food's been around for centuries, and it encompasses much more than Black food. But we coined it, so it's ours. So I use it kind of interchangeably, but it just depends on the context.
Mm-hmm. You are deliberate about centering community and culture in your projects, and they are even explicitly stated in your restaurant's mission statements. Why have you made this your charge?
Well, I believe that this was done before me, and I'm just carrying on the tradition of being intentional about our places and placemaking and what these buildings mean to the community here and at large. I think that we have the opportunity to continue to grow our communities. Third places, as they're so often called, are a center for nourishment and fun, joy, and and gathering, and sometimes meeting. And if I'm thinking about Hush Harbor, my new place in DC, and I think about the original Hush Harbors when Africans that were held captive on plantations created places out of nothing, just in the woods, deep in the woods. So it wasn't really about the place. It was about what we were doing there. And if I use that as my inspirational sort of, if I try to gain understanding of what they were doing, that my mission here in 2025 and beyond becomes much more clear that no matter what we're doing, we can be eating, having a good time, drinking, but we have to be very intentional about the purpose for our gathering and what we're doing here. So I've always carried that with me, and I think it's helped me come into focus. I serve food and beverage, right? We serve drinks, but it has to be more for me. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it.
Mm-hmm. You've been clear about how you believe we need to reclaim soul food. What does that mean, and why do you believe that?
Well, reclamation starts with the idea that we've lost it somehow. And I think the way I view it is it's a couple of ways, right? We've lost it in the sense of, more recent, you see other chefs who are not Black chefs or not rooted in African culture, or Africans in here in America, have sort of commodified and taken Southern or Black food or soul food and made a lot of money off of it. It made a lot of, accumulated a lot of power off of it, right? And fine dining chefs. So, or not just fine dining, right? If you look at the emergence of hot chicken, fried chicken, Nashville hot chicken, which is attributed to the Boltons and I think it's Prince, the Prince family. But if you look at the top fried chicken places in America, ain't no Black people on that list as far as sales are concerned, which doesn't necessarily need to be our metric. And I'll get to that later. But the question I had for, many years was, why is that? This is a food that stereotypically belongs to Black people, right? Mm-hmm. It's been attributed to us. And for some reason, whether it be Popeyes or KFC or Chick-fil-A, or even with Dave's Hot Chicken and Raising Cane's and all these other franchises that have gone on to make billions and billions of dollars, Black people are not leading these companies. So there are a number of reasons behind that. It's not just one thing. But I think that if we want to participate, we have to reclaim it. We have to take it back. This is our food, right? There are a lot of non-Italians that own pizza shops. That's fine. But pizza is Italian, right? Mm-hmm. There's no need necessarily I'm not Italian, but I wouldn't say they need to reclaim it because they got a strong hold on it, right? Everybody can do it. And I'm not saying no one can't fried chicken. And that's just one example. But we have far too often allowed others to, and we're patrons of these places. We've allowed others to come in and do things with our cuisine and our culture, right? And our agricultural methods and our genius, and to make a lot of money and gain a lot of power off of them and gain a lot of resources. You can even look in the fine dining sector. When you look at a guy like Sean Brock, who's from Appalachia, I believe, or wherever he's from, come into prominence on the strength of our food and our culture. Now, there are a lot of reasons behind that, right? There's a lot of, it's not just he did it and came up because he was white. There's a lot going on there. There's media and all sorts of stuff. But I think that part of it is we have been ashamed. I know when I was in culinary school in 94, and even now, Black chefs do not want to do stereotypical soul food or Black food, right? You'll see, I remember the guy, Black guy out in Seattle, I forget his name, the brother that had the soul food restaurant.
June Baby?
June Baby, correct. I forget the chef's name, but, and nothing wrong with what he did, but he duck confit, fried chicken, and that's fine. I've done that before and I think it's great. But often we feel like we have to morph it or mold it into something that is acceptable to white people and sort of the white audience. And it's fine if that's what you want to do, but we didn't grow up on that. And, I don't think you should do that unless you came up with that desire to do it. Again, there are a lot of reasons why we may change something or want to participate in the fine dining sort of realm. But one of those reasons is the shame and the guilt that comes along with being told that your food was no good, your food was trash, or the way that you did it. And that's, this is a centuries long marketing campaign that, America and beyond has put out there. So I think that it's important because this is my food and it comes natural. It's in my DNA. And I think that's not just me, it's many other people. And so if you want to cook, the easiest thing to cook is something that you grew up on, right? If you look at Daniel Boulud or Jean Georges or, Wolf, like you look at all of these great chefs, some of their best work is stuff that they grew up on that their grandmamas used to cook, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we owe that or deserve it as well, and we're worthy of it as well. But it first starts with accepting that your cuisine is great and you're going to lean into it. And that's the reclamation that I'm talking about. Not just the food, but also the culture that comes along with it.
How else have commercial pressures, and I guess more recently social media, influenced how Black food is defined and discussed?
Well, media, including social media, is everything, right? We are locked in, right? We believe what is, sadly, most of us, many of us, myself included, believe or influenced, I should say, by what's put out. And social media affects the view of Black food in a lot of ways, right? Again, I'll go back to, even fried chicken, right? Fried chicken is not an easy thing. I was having this conversation with a friend of mine the other day where you can look at a clip online, it's 90 seconds, to show you how to make some great fried chicken. Fried chicken is one of the most labor intensive, challenging things to do in the kitchen. It's especially in a restaurant level where you have to repeat it every single day. It takes great care, and you have to understand the science of what's going on, and you have to be in tune to the product and to where even your product comes in and how you break it down. So I think that, not just Black food, but food in general has been sort of squoze, if that's a word. It's squeezed into this little, oh, you can do it and it's simple sort of hole that minimizes the effort that goes along into it. Now, I'll stretch out a little broader there. It's the same with restaurants. We're having a challenge right now with people understanding the value of restaurant labor and all that goes into it. And people minimize it and say that they're not tipping. And people don't understand, well, you can just do this, or why don't you just do that? Now, restaurants should be cooking great food and delivering great service and drink. But there's a lot of work, time, and effort and resources and history that go into every single restaurant that is open for more than a week, even those that are just open for a day. So I think that social media plays a big part, but it also, on the flip side, on the positive side, and there's so many positives of social media, it can educate, right? There's so much I've learned. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I've learned so much about my own culture, my own history through social media, where it can give you a little breadcrumb, it can give you a little nugget, and you go down you pick up a book, go check out some books or buy some books, and you can learn so much more, or it can, open your eyes up into, wow, some content is long form. So if someone takes an hour or 2 hours to fry some chicken and they don't speed through it, that educates you like, wow, this is no easy feat. So I think they're both positive and negative, unintended negative consequences of social media. And the onus just comes down to us to put it in its proper perspective.
Speaking of positive and negative, what soul food trends and innovations have you seen over the last several years? I would say longer than that, since you've been cooking, positive and negative in terms of soul food.
I think the positive about soul food over the last several years has been, well, soul food is not just one thing, right? I think we still battle that, but stereotypically, you think of soul food or Black food as, yeah, fried chicken, macaroni and cheese, potato salad, collard greens, cornbread, and sweet potato pie, maybe some banana pudding, right? We had candied yams. We have these 5, maybe 12 dishes that are supposed to be the end all be all of soul food. And I think that, like, what you're on a mission to is discover this. There's so much more. If you talk to Black folks, regionally, right? You can't even shrink us regionally, but if you just talk to Black people in Minneapolis, right? Black people everywhere, you know what I mean? The Black experience in upstate New York over the past couple centuries not the same as someone that has, generations in Mississippi. Now, you'll find some commonalities, but it's always not the same. And most of the time, is because our ancestors largely cooked what was available to them. So obviously, if you're in the Deep South, what was available to you is not the same as if you're in Rochester, New York. And make no mistake, Black people were in Rochester, New York, and everything wasn't sweet up in Rochester all the time. So anyway, I think that, one of the trends that I've seen and I've loved, even if you go back to any cuisine, but definitely like African, right? You think Africa's a continent. People say African food. What the hell is African food? That's nothing. That's like saying North American food. That's crazy. There's no such thing. So soul food is many different things to many different people. And I've seen that. You've seen it on the shows. You've seen people talk about what they eat and what they don't eat, or we never had this. And we have fun debates online, whether the potato salad should have mustard or whether grits should have sugar in them. Those are fun arguments. But if we look back at sugar or not in grits, many times that was because of someone's use or where they lived or why they needed to put it in there. It's a very fun conversation, but it also can be an educational breadcrumb. So that's one positive effect, is that while we have these little computers in our pocket to know everything, or we think we have access to everything, the depth of knowledge that exists now that did not exist over the last, 30 years ago when I was in culinary school is just incredible, and it's amazing. Some of the negative things are that, just like anything, stereotypes can spread pretty quickly and negatively, right? And, I've been in media or TV a little bit, right? And sometimes if you don't fit the model of what an executive or producer wants on a network, as far as a stereotypical Black chef, like, you ain't getting the show. You're not getting the opportunity. So I know myself and some of my colleagues that don't cook, every Black chef does not cook or specialize in soul food. You shouldn't have to, but if you want to go on a certain network or a certain show or certain, get cast for something, and you talking about this sister from Oakland, and you want to cook Italian food, they like, nah, we need an Italian chef, but not like you. And, those are some of the trends that speak to the larger sort of fabric of American society. But that's something that I always want to see change, is that, we are so different, as are all human beings. We should have the opportunity to be showcased as dynamic and multifaceted, or just not in Black food and culture. So that's something I've seen over the past several years that I don't necessarily know. I think that we have some incredible talents that, you look at Carla Hall and Sonny Anderson and Aisha Arrington, just to name a couple that, that are in media. They are not what you would describe as stereotypical Black cooks, right? And they have done incredible things in TV and media, but I think there's a lot more work to do.
Yeah. In general, how do you think restaurant soul food differs from home-cooked soul food?
Man, that's a good question. I think, the first thing is you got to wash your pots. In the restaurant, you got to wash that cast iron skillet or make sure it's sanitary, right? At home, we didn't call my grandmother Big Mama, but a lot of people got Big Mamas. My grandmother was grandmother. She was very proper. And I mean, she was from the South too, but grandma or Big Mama or grandmother, you better not wash that pot. I remember one time I was in my grandmother's house and I first started cooking, and, I was scrambling eggs, and that was my thing, scrambled eggs, noodles, little things. I was probably 18 years old. And she had this non-stick skillet that was just so amazing. You could scramble eggs in it, put a little butter in that joint, and it just slid right out. And I was, we didn't, coming up, I ain't had no non-stick skillet in the house. And it was so cool. We didn't live with her when I go down there and scrambled eggs. But also you had to clean up after yourself. So I scrambled myself some eggs one time. We grew up poor, so we put a little baking powder in the joint to make it fluff, and make you think you got more eggs. So I scrambled the eggs, slid them out on the plate, and then I came around, I washed it. I washed it with a little Dawn and maybe Palmolive. I can't remember. But she came around the corner, and the look on her face like, oh my God, what are you doing? And I realized at that point, you cannot wash a cast iron skillet in the same way you wash everything else. because you wash off the seasoning, the love, right? All of the care that's gone into that. So I think that's one thing that, you see the flavor. People like, oh, this doesn't taste the same. Well, restaurants, the best of them, very clean and not sterile, but they're clean environments and they have to be methodic. In a home kitchen, there's a much more nuance and much more art to it, right? If you just go to the store with someone who's a Southern or soul food cook, or the market, or in the field, there's a feel to when the green beans are ready, right? And what you do with them, depending upon the moisture, how much rain we've gotten this season. There's a feel to selecting. I watch my mother sometimes in the grocery store and just go through the meat, and she's just looking at different things, and ain't none of it good enough in the store. But they look and feel, and they might not even be able to articulate what is in their soul, but there's a feel to home Southern cooking that is different in a restaurant. In a restaurant, as much as you want to go to farmers markets or support local farmers, we just don't have that system, right? We have to buy in large amounts, and the small farms cannot keep up. So the green beans are the green beans. After they're trash, you got to send them back. But if there was a drought, or if there was too much water, that affects the bean, and you're going to have either, more moisture or less, and you got to cook it. So I think that, you can still make great soul food in restaurants, of course, but the biggest difference is that is a more intimate, up close, personal experience at home where you can just sort of watch the cook. And also, there's some times where it ain't that great, depending upon what's going on. And it could be a money issue, well, I shouldn't even say that great. Things could change, she might not be, or he might not be feeling that well, or something's going on with the family, and you can taste it in the food. You might get yourself a butter and toast sandwich for breakfast. And you're like, Grandma, what's going on? I'm mad at you, Granddaddy. Sit down and eat. So I think they're both significant, but I always say this: there's nothing. You cannot repeat it. No one, I've never had it. There's no one in a restaurant ever in any culture that I've ever had that's as good as the home cooked meal. Nothing can duplicate it. Is it the feel of the chair, the environment? I don't know, but you just can't do it.
Yeah. To what extent do you consult the past when refining your recipes? Do you adapt all family recipes? Do you do historical research or consult other chefs and peers?
I always look to the past, always, in everything that I do. I don't know if I talk to my peers as much than I talk to an elder or my mom, mostly my mom. And, I remember one time my grandmother left she's an ancestor now. And years ago, my mother was cleaning out something. She found her old angel biscuit recipe. And I was so excited because my grandmother made these, just absolutely amazing angel biscuits. They were light, fluffy, and we used to just get so excited as children, my siblings and I, when we go down there just to think about the bread she would make. She made these, popover rolls and these biscuits. And I was so excited because, I'm a fully formed chef. This was maybe 10, 15 years ago. And I made these biscuits, and they were some of the worst biscuits I've ever made. And, my grandmother in her last few years, she suffered from dementia. So I'm like, did grandmother, was she tripping? Because she wrote this is also an interesting tidbit. The recipe was written like several times in this book. And I said, why is it written several times, the same recipe? And you could see some mistakes on like the last page. And she said she was trying to keep her memory. That was something that the doctor told her to do, write things over and over that she knew about. And so that was a insight. But the first joint, on the early pages was right. And she said, nah, that's the recipe. So when you ask, do I consult it? Sure, I do consult the history. And I'm wondering why my biscuits were trash and hers weren't. So I went to the grocery store, went to Wegmans or something and got some manteca, which was lard. I would imagine that my lard is different than hers, right? The flour, the pan, like all of the things could be different. Those little things could turn them off. Or my method, the method that I use. So oftentimes, sometimes you're left with more questions than you are answers, but I always consult the past. And what I'm trying to figure out is like, why was this so good back then? Or what made it good, right? Some things you're never going to bring back, right? The andouille that Paul Prudhomme's grandmother used to use is not going to be duplicated. So if I'm using his recipe for red beans and rice or jambalaya, I'm not going to get the same flavor. So what I have to do is try to get the modern flavor. So I always look back and I try to take clues and how can I adapt that? You're not going. I don't think you'll ever get the exact recipe. Just like we talked about before, you're not going to, be able to cook the same way. I can't cook like Leah Chase, Chef Leah Chase, because I just don't have access to one, the 50, 60, 70 years that she was doing it, but also just the ingredients. The earth has changed and it's just not going to be the same. So I look back at old recipes and then you can find out through the stories, right? If you read Edna Lewis's cookbooks or if you watch some Leah Chase videos and you can read through the stories and they'll say things that are not intended to necessarily give you the right recipe, but you can pick up on that. Like, oh, she was using cresses. She said something about creases. And I'm like, okay, what is that? It's the type of green that she was using in her gumbo's herbs, right? And so you can dig and what does that do? Then you can go a little, geeky, like, why is that different? Why does that green matter? Where was that from? Like, there's so many questions you can ask yourself just from a recipe, even if there's no story behind it. You can ask yourself. Leah Chase used to put butter in the fried chicken pot. She would put a stick of butter in the fried chicken pot. And the first time I thought about that, I'm like, yo, how do you fry chicken with butter without it burning, right? And the butter was probably different. Maybe her temperature was different, or maybe it was clarifying in real time and she skimmed off the milk solids because she talks about the bubbles, waiting till the bubbles go away. So maybe it's just another way of making clarified butter and putting that oil in there. And she had enough, so it didn't burn. So I'm saying, yeah, I always look back and I always try to figure out like what was going on at the time that they were making these things. And it really helps.
Now we get to questions that I ask every guest. What songs got people on the dance floor when you were going out dancing at your peak?
Well, I'm a 90s kid, man. Or, I came of age in the 90s and I'm from Alexandria, Virginia, which is Northern Virginia, right outside of DC. So the first thing that comes to mind is go-go. I was youngin', junkyard. Everybody, when you grew up, like when you were young, had their band. Even now as adults, you like, oh, that's my band. And early on, I was a Junkyard Band fan, Bugs, and a bunch of other players in that band. So, Essence, Backyard, Huck Bucks, Northeast Groove. So not any go-go, but a lot of go-go. But if I could, so Junkyard had this one song called Hee Haw. And it was almost like a Soul Train line, but for DC. So, and I don't want to mess the song up, but when the song came on, they would have this procession where people would line up, or maybe they would form a circle, and people would do the hee haw, but they sort of add their own variations to it, and it became like a contest. No winners or losers, but it was just super awesome. Some people could do it better than others, and so yeah, that's one joint that I remember, hee haw. I mean, the classics are the classics, Maze, Frankie Beverly, Earth, Wind and Fire, get people dancing, man. That Stevie Wonder, get people out there. Nothing modern comes to, I'm trying to think, we had, looking back, some of the stuff we ashamed of, but it's all good. A lot, Nelly was getting them out there. Pharrell was getting them out there. Getting Hot in Here was a big one. You threw me for a left one with that. That's a good question, though. 90s stuff, man, we was moving. That's one thing, too. Not to take this too long, but one thing, too, 90s was moving, we started to dance a little less, but people were still dancing.
What is a Black cultural work that's a classic, but is underappreciated? It could be a book, movie, song, poem, play, whatever.
Black cultural work that is underappreciated.
Yeah.
My spirit just said say this. So my siblings and I, we grew up on I'm Gonna Get You Sucker.
Uh-huh.
Keenan Ivory Wayans, I guess, I forget who else was in that joint, Isaac Hayes. Listen, man, I used to quote that joint, preach, brother. I used to quote that
To
to
this
this
day.
day, man. So but obviously it didn't reach wide, and it wasn't supposed to reach wide acclaim. So I think it's so. If you go back and look at it, it's so stupid some of the joints, but I'm pretty sure they filmed that with about $800 and 4 jars of tomato sauce, as a budget. But it was so good, and it just started to show the genius of. I think Robert Townsend might have written that or directed it.
Keenan Ivory Wayne.
Yes, but I'm gonna say I'm Gonna Get You Sucker the movie.
And what particular dish did your family make that you look forward to the most?
I think for me, if I'm going back, is my grandmother's bread. The biscuits were amazing, but she made these rolls that were like these turnover rolls, popover rolls that I don't have a recipe for, but they were my mouth is watering. She would bake them. I mean, I would smell these things. And now that I know about yeast dough, she had to start them the night before, and she had to get up like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And I have made them one time, but mine were just not as good as hers. But she put butter, like you make the roll and then you put some butter and you fold it over. And hers was so buttery and so rich. They were the absolute best thing ever. And I just could not wait to get down there because God bless my mother, but she ain't never made them rolls. Well, she did. I don't remember them. So I had to be my grandmother's turnover rolls.
Chef Harper, I want to thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate what you do. I'm a fan of yours. I patronize your businesses. I actually went to Queen Mother's yesterday. Yeah, so is there anything else you want to say, or you can tell the people where they can find you?
Yeah, I want to say thank you. I appreciate your work because you and several others are keeping this is a catalog right here. This is a work that will be told, just think about it, 100 years from now, somebody will listen to this, just like we listen to, the slave narratives, for instance, different circumstances, of course, but this is going into the canon. So, and this is very important. So I'm just really grateful that you would find what I have to say interesting. And I just, want to encourage you to keep up the good work, and definitely appreciate you coming to the places. Again, Queen Mother's is Queen Mother's Kitchen in Crystal City, Virginia, National Landing. And Hush Harbor is hushharbor.co, and that's on the H Street corridor in Northeast Washington, D.C. And anything on me is I'm on Rock Harper on Instagram or chefrockharper.com. That was a lot of URLs, but just Google one of them and you can find me everywhere.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I want to thank my guest again, Chef Rock Harper, for a wonderful conversation. You can find Chef Harper online at chefrockharper.com, and on socials, Instagram and Facebook, he's just Rock Harper. And again, his two places are Queen Mother's Kitchen in Crystal City, Virginia, and Hush Harbor in Washington, D.C. I thought a great deal about the lessons for this episode, and there are a couple. As Chef Harper says, we need to reclaim our culture and our legacy, things that our ancestors labored over, things that they valued. We should be able to do them in public space and commercial space, even when there may be obstacles against us getting as far as others might. I thought it was important that Chef Harper mentioned the Italian example. As he said, everybody makes pizza. Anybody can make pizza, but it's associated with Italians and it's fine. There's kind of an understanding that it is an Italian thing, even if everybody's making it. That's important because so often the straw man in these conversations and food media that reactionaries will tell you is that, oh, we're being persecuted. They're saying that you can only make food if you're from that culture. It's a lazy straw man designed to deflect criticism about unequal access and unequal representation and unequal opportunities. Nobody's stopping you from making tacos or Vietnamese food or fried chicken for that matter. But yeah, we need to reclaim our legacy in an active, positive way, and that's not exclusionary. There's nothing wrong with that. There is also implicit in this episode a delicate balance when you're doing cultural work. We don't need to be ashamed of our culture. We can embrace it, all of that. However, we also have to resist being stereotyped and pigeonholed, right? So there's a balance. You want to celebrate and embrace your food, but you don't want to be told that that's the only thing you can do. That's the only thing people want you for if you want to do something else. That is not an easy thing to navigate, I'm sure, for people who do cultural work. And the final lesson is that we actually do need hush harbors. Culturally, they're so important. So if you recall, the hush harbor as a historical concept in Black culture means basically an outdoor space out in the woods, somewhere secluded, where Black folks, enslaved folks can go talk, worship, plan, resist, away from the eyes and the gaze of the enslavers. And it's such a powerful concept. Chef Harper used the name of it for his DC establishment, where there are no cell phones allowed. So he took the concept, the name of the concept, and put a spin on it. But the underlying idea, we need space to speak amongst ourselves freely, is key. That in this modern world, with surveillance and technology and everything, it's extremely difficult to do. Because of technology and just because of the way things have been going, we do not necessarily have total access to conversations amongst ourselves, but we can have discussions and efforts that are just centered on us. They don't have to be in relation to others, positive or negative. So that's what I take away from the concept of Hush Harbor. Even if we don't have it technologically, we can have it symbolically. For an object lesson in what happens when we don't have Hush Harbor, we don't have space amongst ourselves to talk. Look at the word woke, which Black folks have been using for a long time to talk about our political and social awareness and consciousness. We have no Hush Harbor. It gets to the public at large and now is totally ruined and bastardized. And not only that, they've been able to enact harsh material change and policies to actually harm us on the back of stealing our concepts and language and perverting them to weaponize them against us. So not everything is for everybody. We need to talk amongst ourselves, whatever that means. We need to stop being so cavalier with certain aspects of our culture. As I just demonstrated, can often have highly negative consequences. Please subscribe, like, rate, review on whatever platform you use to listen. Visit the website blacktcpod.com. Until next time.